Welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jessie Ott, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Hello, and welcome everybody to Thursdays. My name is Jessie Ott, and I have Jeff Foss here with Suavecito Tequila. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Jessie.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And we were chit-chatting just a little bit. And Jeff told me this is his first podcast appearance. So welcome to the podcasting world. It's a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, good, because we have a lot of fun on this podcast. And no big surprise here. We are going to test the waters, here and try some of the Suavecito. And can't wait to get into the brand. They've got some really unique positioning in the U.S. here, and I can't wait to get into the story. So, Jeff, where are you calling from today?
So I'm calling from Arvada, Colorado. In my basement, as you could probably tell in my video.
No, I couldn't. I mean, there's no windows, but you can't tell. It looks pretty cheery down there for a basement.
Yeah, right.
But, in the north, basements are pretty common.
Yes.
To build out and have bedrooms and whatnot.
Yep.
I grew up in Iowa, so.
Okay.
Especially being in Tornado Alley.
Yes. So you're from
Not
southern
that means
Iowa.
anything anymore.
Yeah, right.
It's everywhere. So are you from there?
So I grew up here. I moved into Colorado when I was about 2.
Okay.
But I've spent time so I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I spent a lot of time there, and then finished high school in Skokie, Illinois, and I lived with my dad. My dad was in north side of Chicago, Rogers Park area of Chicago. So, yeah, finished high school there, and then fought my way back here to Colorado, where the weather is sunny. Might not be warm all the time, but it's at least sunny. Get away from the Midwest gray.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that gray. I have a friend who needs a lot of sun, and she can lay out when it's 30 degrees as long as there's no wind. It's not so bad, and have a little heater, but she needs a lot of sun, and she makes it work in Iowa. But I didn't realize Colorado had more sunny days than the Midwest.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Colorado, at least of the places I've lived, Colorado is one of the few that the snow melts when it's 20 degrees, and just because the sun beats on it during the day and it's still 20 degrees outside, but the snow will melt, which is always interesting to me. Yeah.
So are you getting any more snow this year?
No, I think it's all going to be rain, but we got some last weekend. Usually we get a big one, right around the switch to spring. We get a big snowstorm, but so far it's been rain.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife likes it better that way.
What did you do so how did you make your way back to Colorado?
Well, it's a long story, but, it was just, I went to college out in Western Illinois, and then lived in Chicago after college for about 5 or 6 years. And I just worked on my, I guess now ex-wife, just to get out here, because it was just much better. It made it easier because her brother lived out here. So yeah, so we just kind of got back here, and at the time it just was the right decision to do. I just love it out here, and just able to get better jobs out here.
What industries were you in?
So I'm a CPA by trade.
Okay.
And I know that's a very boring thing, but I've just
very
always loved
boring thing.
It is a very important one. But it's interesting. I've never liked taxes, so I've never been that CPA. But
okay. That's a big difference.
I've always worked for manufacturing companies. I love the manufacturing realm, and it's just making things and doing different things, and taking raw materials and making them into something. Always fascinated me, and so just got in the background with my CPA and getting controllership and CFO positions, and then I was a consultant for probably about
okay.
Yeah. So then and then I just started working for my dad. So this is my dad's business. I love it, and I've helped him since he started it out from taste testing his formula in the earlier the like 2008 timeframe, and helped him build that business plan. And once he could afford me, then I started working for him.
Nice. Okay. So, what was your dad's idea of why tequila? Like what?
So in about 2000, my dad sold his construction business and retired. And then one of his warehouse guys, who's from Mexico, called him up, and he had come up with some land and some other things. And so asked my dad if he wanted to buy an agave farm. So my dad's like, well, I don't know anything about it, but I'm getting kind of bored being retired, so why not?
He had no idea what he was getting himself into, did he?
No idea, right? Um, so it started, and one of the things that my dad has always done is he's um, found people in that are, call them subject matter experts in different areas, and always talked to them or hired them on as for a retainer just so he could learn more from them. And so one of the things my dad did when he went down there was he got this guy, his name was Dr. Luis Ramirez, who was the leading agricultural professor at the University of Guadalajara. And he had an expertise in agave. And so my dad wanted to kind of learn from him about the agave plants, and actually took him around with him to, I think, 5 or 6 different farms to figure out which farms would be the best. And they finally settled on one that was actually up in the hills. So that, we started with the Highlands agave. So the soil in Jalisco is all volcanic, and the richer soils are up in the hills, and because all the rain kind of flows down the hill. And so it leaves a much more fertile, thicker, more rich soil up in the hills. And so my dad hopped on that, planted, so for the next 6 years, we planted a section, because it takes about 6 years for the agave plants to fully mature for harvesting. So kind of broke it out into 6 different sections, started growing that first year, started growing the first plants. And then by the time that it was time to harvest, was about 2008, which here in the States was the big housing market kind of recession. At the same time, the agave market tanked. My dad couldn't actually really sell his agave. So we were talking about one night we were talking about, what he could do. And, I told him, look, if you had lemons, you would make lemonade. So instead you have agave. Only one thing you could do is make tequila. So let's make tequila. And so,
Can I
um,
can I can we back up just a second? So was the idea of buying the land to sell the agave and not to make a brand? I mean,
initially it
was the
was this, just
original
sell the
business
agave.
plan?
Yep.
Okay.
That was all it was. Had no intention of making a tequila at all.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so now there's only one way to get rid of his agave, which is to sell tequila. And so again, Dr. Luis Ramirez at the time was starting to formulate a non-alcoholic version of agave, which we now know as agave nectar, that's sold here in the United States. But back then, it was all it was a process to help diabetics in Mexico, and he was just kind of formulating how all of this would work. And we decided to take that process that he was doing and put it into our tequila, and because nobody else was doing it, it's just a differentiator from what
Yeah.
everybody else was doing at the time. And so it's taken that unfermented agave and putting it back into the tequila. It was the sole purpose of it is to take the burn as it goes down out of the tequila.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we spent about 2 years formulating this and finding the right barrels to age and do all these different things. And so we taste tested a lot of tequila for 2 years. But yeah, finally got it. Started selling in 2010-ish, 2011.
What kind of barrels do you use?
So we do, most of tequila uses some sort of bourbon. So we're just trying to figure out which bourbon barrels that we liked. We started with the Jack Daniel's bourbon, and we did do some with just brand new American oak barrels. which had good taste to it, but wasn't quite the same as using an already used bourbon barrel.
Yeah, it
And
gives
so
that
we ended up,
little sweetness to it,
yeah, it was, and
rounds it
it just,
out a little bit.
yeah, and you had to age it a little bit longer too. And so,
Yeah.
so it was just, yeah, with the already used bourbon barrels, the tannins are already there, the barrel's already, kind of used, and so it's easier to get the flavors out of it that way. Um,
Now, did you look at any other kind of barrels besides bourbon?
at that time, no, we have, so the distillery that we're using now does have some other ones that we are experimenting with for
Okay.
future releases. Yes,
Okay. Cool. That's exciting.
it is exciting. Actually, it's a lot of fun.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, sure. So here, actually, I have one. So this is
Okay.
you can see it, our
Yeah.
Founder's Reserve, right? So our Founder's Reserve is one of them, and it's actually barrel strength. So it comes out at it's about 50, anywhere between 52 and 55% alcohol.
Okay.
And it's our Añejo, so it's been sitting in a bourbon barrel for 2 years, and then they age it for another 6 months in a French oak, which in this case was a cognac.
Nice.
So it has a little bit of the cognac flavor to it, a little bit of sweetness from that cognac, and it's just
Hmm.
it's a fantastic taste.
Yeah, I bet. It looked clear.
It's not.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No, it looks
Okay.
kind of looks like it because there's nothing behind it.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, let's look at these different colors. Like you can really tell that's more of a purple that versus this amber.
So it's got a little bit. So the French oak is going to give it a little bit of a lighter amber color, but it's if you put the two together, it's a little bit darker. Because it's not so. When it comes out of the barrel, you dilute it with water to get down to the percentage of alcohol that you're
Yeah.
going to sell it at. But this is completely not undiluted at all. So it's straight out of the barrel, and it is finished in that cognac barrel, which gives it a
That
good
sounds
flavor,
amazing.
gives us a little bit
Yeah.
darker hue to it as well. One of the other things too that we do is we have brand new glass bottles. So they're clearer, cleaner, so you get the true color of our tequila. So we're not actually hiding anything out of that. And that was very important to us as well.
Well, what about this movement that you're seeing on no additives? Is that something that you guys have looked into or talked about?
So we're always fighting that. So we have in our minds, we have zero additives at all in our tequilas. Some people like to say that because we add the agave nectar back into the tequila, that is an additive, which technically it is.
Okay.
But also technically, according to the CRT, the Tequila Regulatory Commission in Mexico, yeast is also an additive. So according to them, no tequila really, if you put yeast in it, is additive free. So, the thing that we do though is our agave is uh, harvested at 6 years. So we let it grow as long as it is supposed to. It's very good. So the agave is very good, and the humidors actually leave a little bit of the blades left on the outside. So when they cut it all down, it's called a hema. And so our hema is actually bigger than everybody else's because we fully harvest it. We harvest it when it's fully matured. We leave a little bit of extra, which adds a little bit of how do I want thickness to the tequila.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Texture.
And so what ends up happening is that those that don't allow their agave to fully mature and they pick them early, or they have they don't own their farms, so they have to buy it from somebody else. So when they're buying it from somebody else, they don't have control of how close that they get cropped and all of the different things. And so what ends up happening is that they'll add glycerin to their tequilas to make it thicker, right? So you get that, for us, if, I should have a champagne flute. So with the champagne flute, you can actually look and see the tiers of the tequila. So if you just wash it around a little bit and you get to see that ours are actually really slow. So the slower the tears are that come down, that means the more pure that agave is. And so for us, that means there's no additives in it really when you
Okay.
come down to it. And so that was very important to us as well. And then with our aging, we actually double age or more all of our tequilas that are aged. So our reposado, to be called a reposado, it needs to be aged for 2 months. We actually age it for 8 months. Our añejo needs to be aged for a year. We age it for 2 years. And then we have an extra
Okay.
añejo as well that should be aged for 3 years, and we age it for 5. So again, when it's not aged for as long, then that's when people start adding caramel coloring to make it look darker than it
Mm-hmm.
really is, right? And so in the end, what you're doing is you're messing with the flavors and the profile, and it's not as pure.
Right.
And then for
People want
us,
that now.
so they really do. But we also put the agave nectar into it, and essentially, if you think of agave nectar, the way it actually is the so when you're cooking the agave for making tequila, so you cook it. Oh, and that's the other thing too is we roast all of our agave in a brick oven. So
Okay.
it's takes longer. So it takes 48 to 72 hours to roast all of the agave, whereas a lot of our competition uses the steel ovens because it takes 12 to 18 hours to do it. So it goes faster, but it's not as you don't get all the flavors out of it that you would in the brick oven.
Interesting. So do you have your own distillery on the farm then, or do you work with another nom?
So very good question. So we went through several different distilleries through the years, but
Mhm.
we settled with our current and final distillery, right? So these they actually reached out to us and wanted to invest in us as a new tequila for them. And so they are part owner of us as well. And so they actually have all of their own farms. And my dad was able to sell his farm a few years ago. But all of their farms are just like my dad's up in the hills and have the same really good agave. And so all of our agave is estate. So it's all owned by
Nice.
the distillery. So they get to, and we get to with them get to define how the humidors cut down the hemas, and harvest and all of that
Yep.
stuff. And so it's
That's
it's
fantastic.
it is a very fantastic.
And what's the name of the distillery?
So it's Distilladora Agave de Azul,
Okay. That's very, and so
and
they
it's
do all
down
estate
1424.
down 14, 20, 24. Okay. Is there any other brands that we would know here that are made there in the US?
So they have a few different brands. One of them that I think is still in the United States is called Asombrosa, which is got a funky little bottle.
Okay.
That's one that they contract for. They have a couple of their own brands. One is
Okay.
called Chula Vista, which I think is just mostly sold in California at the moment.
Okay. 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 And so let's talk about the bottles, then the glass and they've got this really cool leather band that goes across where all the branding is. It's really, really, really sharp looking with the little agave plant here that's etched into the glass. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so back in the day when my dad was first starting out, it was trying to find a different bottle than what everybody saw on the shelves in the
Yeah.
United States. And we just found this one, kind of talked with the designer and kind of told him what we wanted. We wanted it to be thin so that you could grab it very well, right? But kind of a little bit longer, but not too wide. And then, it's got grooves on it to hold up the labels. And then it's got the agave plant on the bottom etched into it. And so it's a custom bottle that we've put together, and we want to make it different than what everybody else had.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And then one of
It's
the cool
definitely
things that we decided to do was we wanted to use a
got the cork top.
yep. Well, so we wanted to use a local guy to make our labels for our añejos. And so we found a guy that he's the fourth generation leather maker in his family. So it just gets getting passed on.
That's
And
cool.
he makes some incredible leather. As the Founders Reserve, this is a fully handmade. So that's actually hand painted. The white is hand painted,
Wow.
and then they knock in the barrel number. They also do the bottle number, and then they'll put in the proof. I'm sorry, the percentage of alcohol.
Okay. That's really awesome. I love that you're using a local artist.
Yeah, I mean, it was important for us to give back to the community that they're in.
Yeah.
And so it was just very cool. And, the opportunity presented itself that, this guy was in the same village as the distillery. And he's taken his business from, him and his wife and daughters to he's got 80 people that work for him now.
No
So
way.
yeah, and so
Yay.
it's a lot of fun. It's very cool.
Yeah. So was this the original bottle design before you even tried to sell it? Like you're figuring out your formula, you're figuring out your bottle. Is that part of the process, the 2-year process that you went through?
Now you're making me try to remember back 15 years ago. I think this was actually the original bottle. I think that's what we did because
Okay.
we've always had we're now at a place that we have to go to a higher end bottle maker. But at the time we'd found a local guy that was just making these bottles, but he could only handle so many
So
bottles
much.
at a time. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is custom from the beginning, from the onset.
So you have this farm, you spend 2 years to get the formula right, you get the bottle, you get the local artist. So now you have a product ready to sell. What happens next?
So we try to find the right places to go. So my dad met some guys in the Cleveland area who knew kind of some people around Cleveland and knew how the alcohol business. And so Ohio's a controlled state, which just means that the state buys, but they're also very particular on what they take in and what they, how they sell it and all that stuff. So we got with them, started selling in Ohio first. And then my dad then moved out here a couple years later, and we started here in Colorado. And so it was just, let's start slow, and let's just kind of build it up. And, we don't know what we don't know. So we'll have to, learn a whole bunch of different things as we go. And there's, whenever you do that, there's always stumbling blocks here and there. And I wish I had done this back in the day instead of, but, here we are 15 years later, and we're in, 32 different states for Total Wine at every single store in Total Wine across the nation. And as you mentioned, and when we were talking, you know, they're about chest level for me because I'm about 6'6", but for most
Wow.
everybody else, they're at eye level.
Yeah.
But it's right in about the middle of their shelving,
Yep.
and it goes across the whole thing. So we
The
are
whole thing.
now we're a top 50 brand at Total Wine, and we're probably the number 14 tequila sold in all of Total Wine stores.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So tell me about how that came about. So you were so was your dad living in Ohio? Is that why
Oh,
Cincinnati
my
was?
dad at the time was living in Indiana, and so he had met a couple
Okay.
people in Indiana who then introduced him to the guys in Cleveland,
Okay.
and Cleveland just took it and ran, whereas, Indiana kind of petered out a little bit. But then, so about the same time, my son was born. And so my dad then wanted to get out here. And so came out here. And yeah, so when we started, out here and then got licensed here and kind of started selling here. And then through the years, we've met different people here and there, but we found two guys out of California that, they, spent their careers building brands and taking brands national. And so we talked to them, and they loved the product so much that they took us to a distributor in California, and they sold, our extra Añejo. And, they have relationships with all the big chains too. And so, They started with Total Wine in California, and the distributor bought, I think it was 3 pallets of their extra Añejo, which is 360 cases, so about 1,800 bottles. And bought that as their first buy, filled all the Total Wines in the Southern California area, and just wanted to see how it goes. And it skyrocketed. And so, a couple things happened. There's one of the stores, don't know which one, uh, some guy from the Emmys who runs the Emmys, like from the background, right? So just kind of controls all of that stuff. He contacted my dad and asked my dad if he wanted to be, one of the, how do you want to call it, gifts, I guess.
Yes, they want stuff
So,
for free. Those
but he was
people.
also then the only liquor sold at the bar in the green area, in the party
Oh,
area in the back.
that's cool.
And so, yeah, so he got to go for that, and he had to, we had to provide 4 bottles, so we only had 4 at the time, but he gave the 4 bottles that we had, Blanco, Repo, Añejo, and the extra Añejo, to all 72 winners, and so they got to take all of that. So it was location or huge publicity for us.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun, and it was right after that that things kind of blew up with Total Wine. So those 3 pallets went to 3 pallets and 6 pallets, and then 9 pallets, and then Total Wine started getting word through everywhere, and all of a sudden, then we get asked to be a Spirits Direct brand for them, and being sold in all of their stores. And so
What was that decision like? I mean, what were the factors that went into thinking about that relationship with Total Wine?
for us, at the time, it was, the way we were thinking about it was it's going to double our revenue, and double, and it's going to get us that notoriety throughout, and I guess the popularity into the States, right? So we're going to be nationwide in a chain. So that's kind of what we were thinking. Spirits Direct is a little bit limiting for us because we can only sell through Total Wine at the moment. But we went from, you know, we did about 10,000 cases the first year, did about 24,000 the second year. And then this past year we did about 28 or 29,000. And then this year they decided that they wanted to beat the tariffs, potential tariffs that might be coming down. And they wanted all 34,000 cases for the year in January and February.
Wow.
We are now able to do that. And so it's been huge for us to be able to do that and to be able to kind of weather that storm for our
Yeah,
cash flow. So
for
we've come
sure.
a long way since we first started. But yes,
So, how much, I mean, do you have a limit to how many cases you can grow to then? Because I know some people that own their own land, they're like, we're done at 100,000 cases because we can't control the quality anymore at that point.
so I'm sure there is, but I don't think we've, with our distillery, they have, I think they have almost 800 hectares of
Okay.
agave farms, which
Okay.
is, I think an hectare is like 4 or 5 acres.
Yeah.
So they've got quite a bit of farm land,
Okay.
and so and they have, this 100,000 square foot cave on their below their distillery where they house all
Wow.
the bottles, the barrels. So
Barrels.
it's where the barrels age. And it's, you know, there's, a couple vents in it that get the airflow going, but
Yeah.
there's no HVAC system. There's nothing. It's just all, you know, natural humidity and, there's just natural coolness. And so it's,
That's awesome.
yeah. And that way that you get the better flavors because you're not adding any mechanical air or tastes to anything. And it's, again, kind of what they do. So
100,000 square foot cave underground. It's
yeah, so
amazing.
I mean, if we were to sell, I mean, if they were not to produce another, or harvest any more agave, I think we could, it would take us 4 or 5 years just to sell the stuff in the barrels.
Okay. And so what's the strategy from here on out? And does your relationship or that spirits direct, does that time out at some point?
So it doesn't time out at the so the one nice thing about Total Wine is that they add 5 or 6 stores every year, so
Yeah.
there's just natural growth there, right? And so we've I think in New York City, they have one store in New York City. Well, I guess sorry, technically it's 2 stores, but it's one building, and it's like a square block in the Long Island, and we've grown there almost 600% year over year from last year to this
Jeez.
year. And so in general, we've been averaging about almost 400% growth at Total Wine. So I think there's still quite a bit of growth that we can do with Total Wine. And so to be honest, that's kind of where we're at the moment. We are going to start doing some international sales, trying to get through that, because we got some people in Europe that want us to start selling there. We've got some folks in Asia, like got Singapore and Cambodia and some places like that. So, we're going to start doing that. Before
Okay.
this year, we were probably thinking about Canada, but I don't know if we want to do that yet.
We they get so we're an international agency. I have a company and I've talked to Tom also, and my partner sent emails to all the different provinces and they all came back saying that their email's too full. So we're gonna have to VPN that one.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the nice thing is that we are with tequila, we're part of the USMCA. So at the moment we don't have any tariffs, but that might change.
Who
Never know.
knows?
Yeah, it always seems to be up in the air.
Yep.
So the one
Evolving
other
door.
thing one other point that I wanted to make about our agave nectar, right? So
Okay.
when you're making tequila, before it gets through the oven, it gets roasted, then it gets smashed into the liquid, then it goes into the fermentation tanks. But before it goes into that, so it can either go into the fermentation tanks or in a hydrolysis tank. And if it goes to the hydrolysis, that's where they make the syrup, the agave syrup. There's no sugars added to it. There's nothing added to it. It's just pure agave that's gone through a hydrolysis to, some chemical reaction there that makes it thick.
Okay.
And that's the agave nectar that we put back into our tequila. We don't take the stuff that's on the store shelves that's got sugar added to it. That's not pure agave. So, the ingredients that we have are still just agave, yeast, and water.
So the piñas that you're using for the agave, are they the same in the same field as the piñas for the tequila
Yes.
distillation?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so it's same,
Yep.
just a different
Same.
process,
Correct.
adding it back, making it a thicker, more texturized tequila, smoother, that kind of thing. That's
Exactly.
really cool.
Yep.
Well, your billboard is impressive, and in the editing piece of this, I will put that picture up there so that people can see
Which one?
um, the Total Wine picture that I took, where you
Oh, yeah.
have
Oh, yeah,
literally
yeah.
your Blanco to your extra, and it's a
Yeah.
full 4 foot space at eye
That's
level.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a billboard. I mean, and everybody is fighting for the same space, and the fact that you're a big player, like a huge player, and our biggest player in the US is it. Wow, that story is really interesting because that's really unique. I don't know of any other brand. I'm sure it's happened, similarly with being, in front of the right people and catching the right time.
It
It's
is.
about timing and people and, all that stuff adds up to
Agreed.
the formula of a brand.
Yes. And we've done it without a celebrity. And for us that's important as well because my dad has worked his tail off for the past 14 years to
Probably
get
harder
to this
than in
point.
construction.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Late
And we've
nights,
gone through
weekends.
so much. Yeah, it's been amazing on what he's been able to accomplish. And without that celebrity person to be able to get that popularity, right? And so
Yeah,
we're doing this all grassroots, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's just keeps on going.
that's great. I'm so excited for you guys. Do you want to do a quick tasting?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I know we have different ones to taste. So do you want to taste the Añejo? Your dad mentioned that the Añejo is your top seller at Total Wine right now.
So yeah, so our Anejo is our top seller. It's it's aged like I mentioned, it's aged for 2 years. It's got a fantastic taste. It's actually my preferred. It's my favorite. We've actually had bartenders win old fashioned and what's that, a Manhattan contests
Yeah,
with
I
our
can see
Anejo.
that.
Yeah, so it's very very good. And it
I've well, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say when I was opening this, because we had to reschedule because I was a little under the weather,
Yes.
and you both recommended I try a little in it. That's the secret sauce, let me tell you. So there is some gone, but I did pour some. But even when I was opening it, there's this smokiness about it that is really prominent, and just smelling it in this glass over here is really an incredible like presence, right?
Yes.
Like I'm here. And it's really cool. And so
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to tasting it. So which one are you gonna try?
So the one I have is called Cristalino. I don't see if you can get it. Okay.
A little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. So it's a kind of a clear one, but so we've taken our reposado and it gets filtered in charcoal filtration system, and it takes the color out of it, but it also gets a little bit of extra flavor from the charcoal. So it's got an interesting flavor. It's kind of a mixture of a reposado and a blanco,
Okay.
and it's a great. So if you ever go to Mexico, the number one tequila in Mexico is actually a Cristalino as well.
Is it really?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not near as good as ours, but we're not there yet. None at all. None at all. All right. So I just poured mine. So the other thing that we intended when we were making this was that, if you smell it, it smells really good. But the other thing that by putting the agave nectar into it and taking that burn out, you can actually taste all the different flavors of the agave. So the agave is a very, very robust flavor to it. And it's obviously very distinct because everybody has that.
Yeah.
If you smell it, you kind of, from high school, your stomach kind of churns sometimes if you smell it wrong.
I
So
guess you experienced that in your 2 years of discovering.
yeah, well, it was the late '80s, and I guess everybody was doing it. So yeah, we could say college then, college. Yeah, I mean it's for me that flavor of the agave and the flavor of all of our tequilas is just so nice, and it matches what you smell. So that's the most important thing too, is that you smell it, it's got good aroma, and then it tastes exactly as it smells, and it's just fantastic.
So what does it taste like?
This one,
Yeah.
well, let's taste it. Tastes very good.
Okay.
So it's interesting because you get a little bit of you get a lot of the agave flavor. You get a
Yeah.
little bit of the reposado from
Mhm.
the Cristalino, but there's some other flavors I can't
Is it
really.
more citrus? Like, sometimes they're peppery, sometimes they're a little
More
salty
peppery,
or
more peppery, I think.
more peppery?
Yeah,
Okay. But
I don't
smooth.
I don't have that sommelier palate, so I can't really tell you exactly what it exactly tastes like. But it tastes to me it tastes very good.
Okay. Awesome. Well, should we switch over to the Añejo?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Here's my fancy glass that I got from, oh, look, you can see my reflection. That's funny. There we go. It's not, I mean, It's the same color, but it looks a little lighter when it's in a smaller glass for some reason. Maybe it's because it's thinner.
Yeah, there's that. It also has to do with the leather label on the bottle. We'll
Yeah,
give it
that
a
makes
little bit
sense.
of different hue to it as well.
It smells amazing.
Yeah. Should taste just as good.
It's very smooth. You feel a little bit in the back of your mouth, like like almost like a tart sense to it that just
Yep.
activates your whole mouth and it makes
Yep.
you water and want more.
Yes.
I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting citrus pepper, not a heavy pepper, but like that spice kind of pepper, like the flavor to
Yeah.
it. I see that it's 35% alcohol, so I guess the agave nectar kind of brings that alcohol level down
No.
slightly.
The reason that we did that is we wanted to be more like tequila in Mexico. So if you ever go to Mexico and get a good Mexican tequila, it's going to be somewhere between 35 and 38% alcohol. It's
Okay.
never 40%. So the United States puts that restriction on 40% alcohol for tequila, for any spirit. And so if you look for us, we're actually a specialty because we're at 35%, and that's the only reason. We are pure 100% tequila. It's just the United States regulations made us do a little bit of I want to say dancing.
And what is that? What did that involve?
Took quite a bit of time to find somebody that actually knew what they were talking about at the TTB
Okay.
and that had some experience with different things and got us to the right folks and got that taken care of. Our whole intention is I don't know how many times you've been to Mexico and you have a tequila down there and then you come back to the United States and you look for that same tequila, you find it, but it tastes completely different than what you had in Mexico. That's the whole reason why, because it's 35% and 40% here, which adds a
Interesting.
completely different flavor to it.
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. It's fascinating that you could bring it in at 35.
Yep, it took us a little bit, but
Yeah.
it worked out that with even though because there are you might find a tequila now that has coffee in it, right? But it's still
Yeah.
called tequila.
Yeah.
It's the same thing essentially, but it's because we have that agave nectar in it that allowed us to do that. And so with that, we put the you know the other thing that we do is we do um, on our label we do put that it's got 2% agave nectar added back into it, which is our way of being honest about what's in the product. And so we have gotten a lot of kudos from the additive-free folks that we're at least being honest about what it is. But that's, potentially the only additive, the only thing that's extra that's in there.
Yeah.
And we don't think of it as an additive because it's pure agave.
Right. It's still the same fruit,
Correct. Exactly.
right?
It's just unfermented.
It's unfermented. So, is there anything else about the brand you want to mention? Is it available online or just Total and that's it?
So it is. So Total Wine does have quite a bit of online stuff. So you can order as long as there's a Total Wine near.
Yeah. You
They'll
have it delivered.
they'll deliver. So we do that in Instacart. So Instacart will do that as well, but it's going to be delivered through Total Wine.
Yeah.
So other than that, we are not online. Gone back and forth. We had been, back in the day, we were on one platform, and the problem with online is that a lot of those different online places go away quickly.
Mm,
Some are still there, but it also has to do with where we are. So we're based out of Colorado, and Colorado has some fairly strict rules and laws about shipping spirits, and if you do it right, there's only really 6 states that you can ship to anyways. Um, so I don't want to say it's not a big profit center for us, and it wasn't a revenue generating portion that we wanted to undertake at the moment.
yeah. Well, I don't think you need to. I mean, you're in
Yeah, I don't think
35
so.
states in the high volume store that I mean, you said you're the 14 tequila? That's incredible.
I know. I know.
That's
Been a lot of
amazing.
fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, what's your website?
It is www.suavecitotequila.com.
Okay. And we didn't talk about the name. Where did that come from?
So we had come up with the formula and we had some samples and we were just going around and around to, my friends, my dad's friends, and one of my dad's friends, his wife was from Mexico and said, Suavecito is what you should call it. And we're like, well, I don't even know what that means. What does it mean? She's like, very smooth, very smooth. And so we're like, okay. And there it is. And then done, right?
It
So,
worked.
it's funny. On our website, we have to battle Suavecito pomade, which is very big, pomade. But, other than that, that's the only thing that I can think of that was Suavecito. But yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, that's where the name came from.
That's cool. So, is there anything else before we move on to you? And
Yeah, so there's one other thing I want to talk about. So our distillery is one of the two things about the distillery. One is we have the only, as far as we know, the only female chief engineer that is responsible for from the agave to the bottling of the tequila, and that's extremely important to us. It's very cool that she
yeah,
is the only one, right? And she is absolutely amazing with what she does and the thoughts that she comes up with, and all the different
what's
things
her
that,
name?
that they do. Zandra Gomez, and she is phenomenal. Um, and then the other part of so again, this has to do with their distillery. They are fully sustainable. So they take the dried fibers, the fibers from the agave, as they crush it out and wring them out and get out of the production process. That goes to the farm. Then when you go through the distillation process, you get 54% alcohol coming out. The other 46% is like a dark brown sludge, which is disgusting and smells nasty. But what
Mm,
happens is it's a very acidic liquid, and a lot of the distilleries will just put it into the ground, which is very bad for the ground. But what we do is they have, well, we call it the worm farm, but essentially what it is it's a giant compost pile. So they mix the brown sludge with the fibers, and then they add the donkeys and the goats and everything else, and they add that to this pile. They let it sit for about 6 months, and then it gets kind of dried out, and it's starting to the fibers, because the agave fibers are very durable, and so they got to break them down. They got to spend the
break it
time to
down.
break it down. But then they take it and they put it in it's about 100 yard by like 3 yards wide trough. And so they have it ends up being about 20 layers that go into this trough, but each layer they'll lay down and then they'll coat it with worms, with California red worms. And then the worms go and dissolve it some more. And they take that, then the dried fibers from that become a fertilizer from when they grow or plant the agave. And then they use some of the byproducts from the worms to kind of enhance that as well.
That's
So
cool.
it's fully sustainable. Nothing gets thrown away. There's no waste. It's
That's
all full
awesome.
cycle. So yeah, love that.
Is that a movement of ideas that are happening in Mexico?
I don't think so. Right now, they're the only distillery that does this. They are actually looking to um, you know, make a side business out of selling
Should.
the fertilizer. So they're going
Yeah.
to probably start doing that. The more we help them with the, byproducts and
Awareness.
everything,
Yeah.
the more they're probably going to be able to do that.
Okay. Well, we'd love to see that more. And because I know that there's a movement here too of people that are really in tune with what's going on over there and protecting the land. And so that is a huge selling point. And, when consumers understand that, that's gonna be a huge point of differentiation for
Yeah,
sure.
agreed. It's huge, and Yeah, and one of the sad things for, the tequila movement is you have the agave farmers are kind of going, they're dwindling down a little bit. And it's because it takes 6 years. So if I plant the plant today, I don't see any return from that for 6 years. And so it's a hard business to get into
Hmm.
and to be able to sustain, because that first 6 years until you're actually selling your plants, very hard. So what you're seeing is a lot of these agave farms that are, somebody can make money and, leave it or sell it. The sugarcane is just taking up that because sugarcane gets harvested twice a year, and it becomes very lucrative. So yeah, it's a very nice thing that we have the estate agave, and we have all of this to ourselves. Um, so it helps us immensely.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that you spoke about that because that's huge. Yeah. So, moving on to you, do you have any mentors or resources that you want to talk about that were instrumental into you kind of learning about the industry?
My dad's my mentor for learning about the industry, and it's been through the years, right? So I really didn't start full bore with him until about, I think it was about 2 years ago. So prior to that, it was, I was helping my dad just build business plans and doing research and, going with him to the farm, talking to the folks down there, talking to people and just kind of soaking in from all of those different pieces. But, I think the biggest, just working with our current distillery has, and going down there. So we went down there in the past 2 Decembers. We actually took our whole team down there this past December, had a company, kind of Christmas vacation at the distillery,
Fun.
you know. Yeah, well, it's to help them. They're finally, so they're on the route to Day Tequila. So it's a bus tour that, you can ride along. It's like going to, Kentucky and taking a bus through all the different bourbon distilleries.
That's cool.
Same concept, right? So
Okay.
they're now open and you can buy all the tequilas that they have at their distillery. You can also take a tour, but they also have a local hacienda that they put people up into. It's beautiful, old 500-year-old kind of ranch that's absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking. They actually do a lot of weddings there as well.
Wow,
And
cool.
so we took the whole team down there, uh, spent the week, um, just being able to see and talk to um, the distillery, the owners, but also everybody that works there, and just talking to them about what they do and what they see. And Sandra has been fantastic, and she taught us how to taste and how to do a tasting for our tequila, for any tequila, and to be able to take and compare, it's just phenomenal. And so I think most of what I've learned was from them about the manufacturing process and how to really speak about um, the tequilas and what makes them good versus what makes them bad. Why would you add glycerin or a caramel color and you know all those things. And it was very, very important for us to not have any shortcuts, do everything the right way, and just build from that. But then about the business stuff, my dad, and running this business because it's not like any other business that I've ever run.
No, yeah, it's there's a lot to it,
There is.
really. And what about any pain points or, what are your biggest pain points you're seeing for yourselves? I mean, it sounds like Total kind of took care of the tariff issue for at least for now,
Yeah.
but is there anything else kind of lingering out there that affects you guys?
It's just social media is still an enigma to me, and to us. We try to use it for the good, but then there's always the bad part of it as well. But as far as pain points, my dad's getting older, and it's just a matter of what we're gonna do, about that if he wants to retire. I think
Yeah.
that's our biggest pain point at the moment is just trying to figure out, what our future at Suavecito looks like, and kind of taking that as it comes and trying to figure that out. I think that's probably our biggest pain point at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense because, like, my next question is your outlook. So, I mean, I'm sure it's positive. You've got a lot of momentum, and sounds like you've got other countries that are very interested. So, a lot of really good positive things are happening for you guys at Suavecito.
Yeah, our outlook is fantastic. And what we do, we keep a pulse on probably about 30 of the stores in different states. So we do tastings from Thursday through Sunday in as many of the stores as we can. They're always telling us, kind of what stories they have, what, these people say, what this person says, so we can see, kind of get that pulse of what everybody's talking about there
Yeah.
at the store level, because we don't necessarily get to see that, especially everywhere. And so that's important for us as well, is to understand what everybody's saying, and to be able to talk to all those different things. The the tequila industry in and of itself, I think it is booming at the moment. So it's like the only spirit that has year over year growth this past year, which is great, and it's great for us because we just keep taking a little bit of that market share here and there. But yeah, for us, the outlook I think is great.
Good.
Yeah.
And Thursday's final question is, what's your passions outside of work? Do you like to ski? Do you like movies,
So
sports?
I mean I love sports, but my passion is my two little kids. And I say little kids. My son's 13, my daughter's 11. I do have an older daughter who's 29, but she doesn't count anymore. No, I'm kidding.
She's an adult.
She's an adult. She's married.
She's
She's
adulting.
good. But it's our lives right now. If I had a passion, I wouldn't be able to see it at all, because my life right now is taking my kids to, my son's
All the
a Boy Scout, plays basketball. My daughter plays soccer,
Yep.
and so it's just we are human Ubers is what we are.
Yes, your transportation.
That's all we are at the moment. But so for us, it's that, and
Yeah.
I've always, put more into my kids than, it's always been an emphasis of mine. But no matter
That's
what
great.
business I've done or been, they take precedent over everything.
That's
So
great.
that is my passion.
Okay, that's a good one to have. Two humans
Yes. Yes.
that you're helping them to be their true self.
They're sure trying. I don't know
Hmm.
if they're ever going to see that, but yeah, you'll see.
Not
My
until
son,
their 20s.
yeah, no, I know. With the oldest one, it was 23 when she called mom and said, "I thank you for everything you did, and I'm so sorry I didn't believe you before. I now
It
see
happens.
everything that you've been saying."
Yeah,
Like,
it happens.
yes, yes,
It just takes 20 years, that's all.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, it's funny. I read somewhere that you're doing your job right as a parent if they are fighting you for their independence, but they are sweet and nice to everybody else outside of the family, or outside of the home,
Mom and dad.
right? Mom and dad, right? So it's funny because my we'll send them off to grandma's, and we'll talk to them, pick them up the next day, and talk to them, and my son will be like, "Yeah, yeah, we were helping grandma, clean the bathrooms, you know, we did all these cleaning and cleaning the toilets and everything else," and we're like, why don't you do that at home?" "Oh, well,
That's
grandma
impressive.
needs the help." Like, "Oh, okay."
I like that response. Grandma probably does need the help.
She probably does. She probably does.
Well, if a 11 and 13-year-old can see that, that's pretty unique. That's
That
pretty
is
good.
pretty cool. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know any 11 or 13-year-old that would ever, under any circumstances, clean a toilet. Sounds like you have pretty
I
darn
didn't
good
know that
kids.
they even knew how to. So yeah, I get it.
I'm sure grandma was telling them exactly how she wanted it done. She was coaching.
Yep.
That's remarkable. That's pretty cool. Well, Jeff, I mean, this has been great. I'm so glad we got together and we're able to connect on this. This old-fashioned idea is kind of in my head now, so I may have to make one of those today
Absolutely.
and
I hear they're
test it
very
out.
good.
Yeah.
Personally, I drink it neat, so I don't like any of the other stuff to go in
I
it.
know. That's the problem. I don't want to add anything to it, but it does sound really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I will let you get back to it then.
All right.
And
Well,
I'll wave goodbye.
thank you very much. It's
Thank
very
you
nice
so
to meet
much.
you, Jessie, and thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no. I'm glad it worked out.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Here, cheers.
Cheers. Produced by Fedora J Productions. Tune in next Thursday and have a great week.